I want to get into some discussion around process considerations and applications for single use, where it suits processes and where perhaps it doesn't. We have some specific audience questions I want to get to on this note as well. But Mark, since you're on my screen, I'll start with you. What processes, generally speaking, what processes lend themselves to SUT and perhaps which don't?
Yeah, so scale is certainly an issue. I mean, if you do have thousands and thousands of liters of material to make, and if you're going to make it regularly, single use might not be right for you. And there's some very nice economic analyses that have been done and published in ISPE and other places like that. My colleague Jeff Johnson published a very nice paper, if you want to Google his name, and he showed where the transition point between traditional facility and a single-use facility based on some economic assumptions. I think those of you who are engineers could run with that for your own situation. So scale is an issue. I think to some extent hazard might be an issue if you're working with cytotoxic materials or radioactives or some other things like that. You might prefer what you see as the durability of a steel or traditional facility. On the other hand, at the end of batches like those, you can dispose of your process equipment if it's single use, much harder to do in a steel system. Plus, you're going to have to deal with cleaning liquids. So I would say for just about everything that I've experienced in my career on the sterile side, sterile, vaccine, cell and gene therapy, single use makes a whole lot of sense. On the solid dose, oral solid dose side, which I don't think a lot of the audience is probably into that, but if you are going in that direction, things like powder handling bags and use of molded plastic parts instead of steel items might help you with your validation, cleaning, help you turn around facilities more quickly. I think there's always a reason to look at disposables and compare them against the alternative. One of the huge advantages, and we'll probably get into this later, is a lot less validation to do when you set up a single-use facility. Items come sterile, ready to use. You've moved the sterilization validation to the supplier. Cleaning becomes generally a non-issue. So I haven't seen a lot of situations in I'd say the last 15 years where I've been involved in a project and we've said, wow, single use is just not the right way to go. Yeah. Sometimes hybrid facilities, but rarely, let's go back to the way things used to be.
Yeah, you just mentioned hybrid, and we had a question from Lance around what scale, size, or usage does it make sense to have a hybrid system, stainless steel solution prep systems, and single-use production systems. So since you mentioned the word hybrid, Mark and Paul, you want to address that question?
I mean, most of the hybrid systems that I've seen started out in their life as full stainless steel systems, and then as they were being upgraded, scale was changed, just end of life for certain components, they became large tanks with single use between them, or joiner pieces, jumper pieces. So if you have a elaborate mixing system where high shear is required, you're trying to get some emulsion to occur, and you already have equipment that'll do that, then I probably wouldn't be advocating to switch over to single-use mixers, even though single-use mixer technology is quite nice. I think from a practical perspective, you'd have to redevelop your process, and you'd have regulatory filings and all the other things that we deal with in our industry anytime you change. So hybrid systems in general, what I've seen would be, here's a great example of where hybrid helps you out. If you have a multi-vessel stainless steel system with piping, interconnecting, lots of automated valves, basically the whole building is the factory. This is how some of the really big biotech plants were set up originally. Everything's connected. So when you start doing steam in place validation, clean in place validation, it's hard to partition, and often a problem in one unit slows you down in another area, either with facility qualification or with facility startups. So by breaking this up into single vessels, single pumps, but then the transitions are single use, you decouple the system and I think simplify the job of the validation engineer. And startups usually go quicker, and maintenance is also easier.
Yeah. Paul, anything to add to the hybrid discussion?
Just that it's enormously complex, and you can really look at each unit operation, whether or not it makes sense to go sort of traditional or single use, and whether it meets your process needs. But there's so many other drivers on any one decision. Is your project timeline suited to use multi-use technology, or are you kind of forced towards single use? Things like that. But process modeling, process economics, there's so many different ways of assessing what's right for any one process. And I think it's been 25 plus years, the available technologies are covering pretty much all unit operations. You may have scale limitations, certainly, but during the pandemic, there's stuff in the news about 7,000 liter single-use bioreactors, and there's 5K is sort of now regularly available as a standard solution. So used to be 2K was the high end. You could argue whether it makes sense or not, but you've got to figure out what are the important inputs to your decision-making process, because you're going to have different outcomes depending on what's important for you.
Yeah. Mark, you
as
mentioned.
A process,
go ahead.
Sorry,
Mark.
I was just going to say, Matt, as a process engineer, the most important thing to do is to think about what your requirements are, not what material you want to buy for your equipment. So what is it I'm trying to do? And as you decide what you're trying to do or define that, then where single use comes in big time is it provides an alternative to what has historically been used in the industry. And there's a whole number of success stories, COVID vaccines being a large one, where single use enabled very rapid deployment of a new product. And as Paul said, sometimes time is your priority, sometimes cost, sometimes a very specific performance attribute is required. I see a lot of times people saying that in things like centrifugation or chromatography, they're not going to go near single use because in their opinion and for the products they're working with, they just can't get the same performance the performance they need. Other people don't need that same performance, and for them, chromatography.
Mark, your audio. Oh, there you go. You're back.
Yeah, you got me back? Okay.
Yeah, your audio broke up just for a second there.
That's okay. That's all right. I always say a few extra things, so they probably didn't listen.